Jong-un. UK police say a nerve agent was used to target a former Russian spy and his daughter on Sunday. And the U.S. Justice Department is suing the state of California for providing sanctuary to undocumented immigrants.
It's 9:01.
KLEK LP Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council. It's now time for Community Conversations, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place, while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
KLEK 102.5 FM, good morning to you on your Thursdays. It was March 8th, 2018. Cato Wonder is flying solo in the studio with you, and I have a special guest with me. He is actually on the phone with us today from the state capitol in Little Rock, and joining us today is our very own state senator, Mr. John Cooper. And Senator Cooper asked for this time to inform the listeners about some important issues that are going on in the legislature. So we're just happy to have Senator Cooper on this morning. How you doing today, Senator?
Good morning. Good to be here, and thanks for having me on.
All right, so Senator, just kind of tell us what's going on. I believe a major bill just recently passed that is going to have an impact on all Arkansas. So just kind of let the listeners know all the details about it.
Okay. Well, this bill passed, so there's no dramatic negative impact, but I just want to inform people of some things that is transpiring that could have happened and is very dangerous to our process and could have been very bad for our constituents across the state if it was not narrowly averted. I'll say it that way. The history of, and I'm talking about SB 30, which is the DHS Medicaid Services funding for the state, that has funding in there for the Arkansas Kids program, Arkansas Kids B program, and hospital and medical services, prescription services, nursing homes, child and life care, and infant care. And so there's a lot of important issues in that. Of course, part of what's in that is also the Arkansas Works program, which is very controversial. And as you and your listeners probably know, I've supported that for a long time, and it means a lot to the state to have that. However, there's a lot of activism out there that is constantly trying to kill it by whatever means they can. And let me give you a little bit of history about the way that policy is formulated in the legislature. When I came to the legislature, I was told by somebody that had been here a long time, there's two kinds of legislators. One that comes down here just to vote, and the other one that comes down here to help set policy. And remember, policy it goes on in committees all year long. That never stops. And there's a lot of vetting that goes on in different kinds of policies over time, and ultimately those wind up being folded into the agency funding bills. Well, you vote up or down on policies, and that's majority votes. And historically, what's happened from Democrats and Republicans alike has been that if you lose a policy vote, you don't try to kill the agency budget when it comes fiscal session time. But here recently, with more activism that's going on in the state, and it's creating some toxic atmosphere, there's people out there that are trying to kill large agency budgets because they disagree with one small part of that budget on policy. And I think that's extremely dangerous for our state. It's not healthy for our constituents, and it leaves people in a state of anxiety and limbo that shouldn't exist. And I've consistently criticized the activism on that of trying to kill agency budgets, regardless of whether that came from the Democrat side or the Republican side. And 2 years ago, I called out several of my colleagues in the Senate about trying to do that. and that first vote failed 2 years ago. But it passed this time on the first vote. It got exactly the number of votes in the Senate that it needed to pass. We were anxious about that because we have 3 vacant seats in the Senate, and there were people trying to leverage those 3 vacant seats because you have to have positive yes votes, and any vacant seat goes as a no because it's not voting. Either you don't vote, or you vote present, or you're absent, or whatever. Well, that technically goes down as a no vote because somebody has to be sitting in the seat voting yes in order to obtain the supermajority necessary.
Now, Senator Cooper, you mentioned voting present. What does it mean when a senator or a representative actually votes present?
Well, that means they're sitting in the seat. They're recorded as being present in the seat, but they did not choose to vote on that piece of legislation.
So it'd be kind of like the same as saying I abstain.
Yeah, exactly. There's no really abstain vote here in the Senate. You can vote present, which amounts to the same thing. You're right about that.
Okay. Now, Senator Cooper, you mentioned that several programs that some of our listeners probably likely depend on were affecting this bill, such as Arkansas Works, DHS. I know one of our volunteers actually works for DHS. So if this hadn't passed, I'm sure that these programs, would have had to like shut down. It'd been kind of like the equivalent, like on the federal level. If these things aren't funded, they have to shut down, which would mean people would be out of work and people would not get services.
That's correct. There's salaries. I don't think I did mention the salaries, but there are salaries included in this too. And to give you a perspective of how big of a bill this was, it was $8.2 billion worth of funding. $8.2 billion with a B. And that is the largest piece of the state budget, and probably the most important as well. So, in my mind, it's irresponsible to put something that large in jeopardy because you disagree with a minor part. The Arkansas Works is not a minor program because it's in total over $1 billion. It's about $1.5 billion. Most of that money is coming from the federal government. So there's probably out of that 1.5, I don't know the exact number, but I would guess it's probably less than half of that in total, and I'm pretty sure that's way less than half of that. I'm being generous on calling it half or close to it, but $8.2 billion, the majority of that is actually comes from the federal government, and when you remove that kind of financial impact from hospitals, doctors' clinics, from nursing homes, what you're talking about there, if you were to do that, you'd be creating chaos for the state.
Now, let's back up just a little bit for those who may not know what Arkansas Works is. When the Patient Protection, the ACA in 2010, which is known as Obamacare, was passed in 2010, it contained a provision to where states could get funding to expand Medicaid, and I think the way that Arkansas went about it, correct me if I'm wrong, is instead of expanding Medicaid, they took the funds from the government and purchased private insurance that people who could not normally afford insurance could take advantage of. Am I still on the right track?
Yes, with one exception. They didn't give the states initially the option. What they did through the mandate and through the individual mandate and through the taxes and fees, a lot of that was also coming from device taxes and income tax and various things like that. The initial intent was the federal government intended the states to be required to do it. However, when the court case, if you remember the Supreme Court case, when they ruled on that, they said that the federal government could not require the states to participate in that. However, they did not do anything about removing the taxes and fees and stuff that was going to pay for it. So the money didn't change as far as the money that was being taken out of the states, out of the economy through taxes and whatever to the federal government. We were still paying for it, but the federal government or the courts did give the states the opportunity of whether to tap in and actually expand those programs or not. And initially, the federal government was paying that at a match rate of 100% to zero. On what was then called the private option has now been changed a little bit. It's now called Arkansas Works is the current terminology that it goes by.
And Senator Cooper, you've mentioned in past places that you've spoken at that one of the reasons this is so important is because Arkansas, like I believe all states, are required by their constitution to have a balanced budget, and if this funding was not available and these people were still required to be covered, it would cause the state to come up short, and the state would have had to figure out other ways to balance the budget. Am I correct?
Arkansas does. It's not actually a balanced budget requirement. It's similar to that. It's called the Revenue Stabilization Act, which is the last thing that we do in a fiscal session. And basically, you're right. It has the effect of balancing the budget. You can't spend more than you take in revenues.
But again, I know that like you was in favor of because this helps, and of course you would think any help that you can get to keep the budget in tow would definitely be a good thing, but some of your colleagues obviously do not feel that way. Senator, do you think that some of the opposition to Arkansas Works and some of the other things that was in this bill is because of ongoing dislike of Obamacare itself?
I think so. I try to make the distinction now. The private option and Arkansas Works, as it is called now, exists through a waiver, and you touched on that a while ago about buying private insurance to work that through the private insurance. That a waiver means that you have an exemption to the law. It's not an enhancement of the law. It's an exemption from some provision of the law. And that is what allowed Arkansas to be creative in doing the insurance part of it, and it was a terrific way of approaching that, and been very successful. And we're streamlining that system all the time, and we have software now that is much more efficient than it was when it first began, and we're constantly working on that. So we have a much better system now than we did a year ago.
Once again, we are speaking with Arkansas Senator Mr. John Cooper, and he's just letting us know about some things that are going on in the legislature. Now, how did some of our other officials that represent us in our listening area, how did they vote? What are their thoughts on it?
Well, I don't know how they justify the vote, but keep in mind that a no vote on this is not a vote against Arkansas Works. It's a small part of what you voted on. And when you vote no on this SB 30, that is a vote no on $8.2 billion worth of medical services funded, which is not only Arkansas Works, but nursing homes, hospitals, and all these other things that I enumerated when we first began here. Unfortunately, all of the state representatives in Cricket County voted no.
Okay. I'm going back to my notes here. We are speaking with Senator John Cooper about some of the things that are going on in the legislature. While I'm going through my notes, you mentioned that this is a fiscal session. What's the difference between a fiscal session and a regular session of the Arkansas legislature?
In a fiscal session, that has to do with appropriations for all of the state agencies. It has to do with money, paying the state's bills, giving authorizations out to the various agencies and cities and counties, funding and things like that. And the regular session is when you have general appropriation bills. It deals with policy and things like that. It's more of a general nature, and the fiscal session is supposed to be very precise and specific to funding. And In fact, we have a pretty strict rule that you don't run general legislation in a fiscal session. In order to bring up general legislation in a fiscal session, it requires a supermajority to even bring it up.
All right. And Senator Cooper, I'm looking at the notes that you sent. You said that our representatives Dan Sullivan, Brant Smith, Jack Ladyman, and Dwight Tosh all voted against the bill. And you said a few moments ago you don't know what their reasoning was, but do you possibly think that there are some constituents? Do you think that they may be possibly acting the best of their constituents? Because there are some people in our listening area that are not in favor of things such as social programs that help, the less fortunate. There are people who are, for whatever reason, against it.
Well, that's true, and that's okay. That is a policy discussion. That's not a fiscal bill discussion. If you have those oppositions, you should do whatever you can to gain passage or defeat whatever you're for or against, but that should take place in the policy setting part of government. Once you lose that vote in the policy side, and then all of those policies are rolled into the large agency budget. If you try to leverage that, you're setting a precedent to really create chaos in state government. That's never been done by either Republicans or Democrats. It's been accepted that once you lose a policy debate, that you don't try to kill an agency budget because if you look at the dozens or hundreds of policies that are in all these large state agencies, if everybody did that, we would never be able to pass a state budget.
And that itself would come with many dangerous consequences.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It'd create chaos.
Well, Senator Cooper, let's look ahead. What is next for the Arkansas Senate? Is this fiscal session still going on? Is it almost over? And what's next?
It's almost over. Actually, the situation that I'm describing here concerning the near miss on funding for the DHS Medical Services budget actually had an agency that their funding failed yesterday over the very kind of issue that I've been describing on the Medicaid side. It was the Treasurer's appropriation, which pays all state employees. And it failed by one vote, and it was over a confusion over a funding issue for the 529 college plan where people set aside money for college for their children, and there was some dispute over that, and I think it was confusion mostly, but there were people, and actually that was on probably the majority of the Democrat side that failed that, although they had help from a couple of Republicans, I think, but that failed by a vote yesterday, and now we're looking at today, scrambling around seeing how we can fix that. And I'm not sure exactly, I know what'll be done, but we'll try to approach that today. But if we get that fixed, then we're about ready to go home and adjourn, I think.
And then once you all go home and adjourn, when will the next session actually be, and what are some of the topics that could potentially come up in the next session?
I think it will be next week. I'm not sure if it'll start Monday or Tuesday, but I think it'll take us about 3 days to do a special session. One of the big issues on that is the PPM issue. I don't know if you've been hearing about that from your listeners or not, but there's some problems with the reimbursements for prescriptions that our pharmacies are being given. And
yes, I've actually heard a lot about it.
Okay, but we're going to try to clean that up in a special session because that's the appropriate place for it.
Alrighty.
And I think we have a bill to present, or somebody has a bill to present in that, and I think we'll get that done.
All right, well, Senator, we got about 1 minute left. Is there anything else that you want to say to our listeners, or just let our listeners know if they have any questions or concerns, because you are their senator, how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, you can call me or text me on 877-0130, and I appreciate the support of the community.
All right, can you give that phone number one more time?
Yes, sir. 870-761-0130.
Well, Senator Cooper, we want to once again thank you for calling in, taking a moment out of your busy schedule. He actually called in. He's actually probably at the legislature as we speak, probably going to go to some meetings and handle some business as soon as he hangs up the phone. So we thank him for stopping by the studio and not stopping by the studio, calling into the studio and speaking with us. And we hope to hear from Senator Cooper again soon to keep us informed on what's going on.
Okay.
Well, Senator, you take care of yourself and you have a blessed day.
You too. God bless. Bye.
And don't go anywhere. We have more on Community Conversations coming up. On our second segment, we are going to do a pre-recorded interview. We had a couple of young ladies who are bringing something very exciting for young ladies. It's going on at First Baptist Church. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. This is KLEK 102.5 FM.